This week's Parsha is Parshas Bo. Parshas Bo discusses the remaining plagues and the decision that Paro to send the Jewish people out of Egypt. It's very interesting to note that the Jewish people seem to undergo metamorphosis in a very short period of time. Our rabbis tell us that the Jewish people clung to idol worship. They worshipped idols, and to them, that part of their life was vitally important. At the same time, though, as the plagues occur and the Jewish people realize that Egypt is no longer going to enslave them, we see a total turnover as God commands them to sacrifice the Korban Pesach, the Paschal Lamb. Now, the Egyptians, one of their many deities, was that animal that had to be sacrificed. For the Jewish people to overcome what they used to worship as an idol and actually slaughter it and sacrifice it to God was a tremendous leap for someone who used to view that which they are slaughtering as a god. Nonetheless, the Jewish people did it. This turnover is very sudden, and the question is, if the Jewish people were so attached to idol worship, how do they manage to just change their entire lives overnight? Or close to overnight, obviously. So the answer really lies in another question. If you look through the simple verses, if you just read them at face value, it seems pretty clear that the purpose of the plagues, the 10 plagues, was to teach the Egyptians a lesson. In the introduction before each set of plagues, 3, and then 4, the verses say that the purpose of this set of plagues is so that you should know that I am Hashem. You, referring to the Egyptians, it actually says it explicitly, and so on and so forth. The verses explicitly state that the purpose of the plagues is that the Egyptians should know that I am God, there's no one like me, and I am God in the midst of the land. Now, at the same time, though, the Zohar states, and it's actually a verse in Isaiah, that the plagues also functioned in a way for the Jewish people. It was a cure for the Jewish people. That's the way it's described by the Zohar. So again, how are we supposed to understand this? That the verses seem to state that the only purpose of the plagues was for the Egyptian people to teach them a lesson so that they would understand who is God, that there is a God, that he has the power to control the environment and so on. But at the same time, the Zohar clearly states that it was a cure for the Jewish people. So these two questions that we ask can really be answered with one answer. A very important foundation in how the Jewish people turned around so quickly upon their exit from Egypt. One of the main problems, as we spoke about last week, with the Jewish people was that they were under the subjugation of the Egyptians and they worshipped the Egyptians. To them, they were part of the Egyptian culture. They viewed themselves as Egyptians. Now, because of that, or primarily because of that, the Jewish people clung to idol worship. It's not that they themselves believed in idol worship, that they themselves made a decision that they are going to abandon God and go and serve idols. It's that in their quest to become the quintessential Egyptian, they decided that they're going to serve idols. And thereupon they clung to those idols because they started worshiping them. And to them, that was making them just another Egyptian. Now, the Jewish people, as soon as they realized that the Egyptians were no longer going to be in charge of them, but more importantly, once they realized that the Egyptians themselves recognized God, that is when the Jewish people were able to abandon the idol worship. Meaning, the Jewish people had a problem. Because of their obsession with the Egyptian culture, with the Egyptian country, they could not abandon the idol worship. To them, that is what it meant to be an Egyptian. Only once the Egyptians themselves, because of the plagues, realized and agreed and confessed that the Jewish God was the only true God and he had all the power and their idols were worthless, that is the way the Jewish people were spiritually redeemed. That's how they freed themselves from the shackles, the spiritual shackles the Egyptian culture had enslaved them in. They had worshipped the idols only because they felt they needed to be an Egyptian, they had to worship idols. But now that the Egyptians themselves would realize that their idols are worthless, then the Jewish people could be properly redeemed. So the verses only explicitly state that the plagues were for the Egyptians, but that is true. But once the Egyptians realized through the plagues that there is a God and there is none like the Jewish God, that was a cure for the Jewish people. Just a question on this week's Parsha. Right at the beginning of the Parsha, right after after the plague of hail, the Egyptian people say to Paro, listen, this is just too much. For how long will this nation be for us a stumbling block? Send out the nation already. They further say that if you don't send them out, Haterem Teda Ki Avda Mitzrayim, when will you realize that Egypt is on threat of total annihilation after all these plagues? What's very interesting about their complaint to Paro was that after that you don't see anything else. Paro doesn't say anything. He doesn't respond or in action. He doesn't decide to send the Jewish people away. Obviously, we have a few more Makkos to go, and the Egyptian people don't make a peep. The question is that the entire nation, the Egyptian nation, came to Paro and said, Paro, send out the Jewish people. We've had enough of the plagues. Borrowed hail, that was enough. We've gotten up to our noses in these plagues. We're going to be destroyed utterly. Why would they just walk away because of one monarch's statement that he said, no, I'm still going to send them away. I'm still going to keep them here. Why wouldn't they just overthrow him? Why wouldn't they just kill him? Why don't they just take over the government from him? It's not as if the Egyptian people couldn't do that. That's the question. Let me know your answers. Have a great Shabbos.